What's important to you? My mission is to ask as many people as possible this question, because I believe once you know what's important, you can design and build a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. My name is James Dean. I'm a life coach, and I hope this podcast inspires you to uncover what's important to you. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at James Dean Coaching, or connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also learn how I can help you understand what's important at jamesdeancoaching.com. Today's guest is accredited by the World Association of Coaches with Neuroscience and the All Ireland Business Foundation. She specialises in delivering high-quality, personalised coaching services designed to meet individual or group needs. Her approach is whole system. Her background in neuroscience, combined with over 2 decades in the health sector, along with her own life experiences, allow her a greater understanding of how as humans we react to everyday challenges, both psychologically and physically. She is acutely aware of the impact of everyday stresses on individuals, teams, and organisations worldwide. And it is her passion to arm her clients with the tools and techniques which will enable them to embrace change and challenge and flourish in what sometimes feels like a very chaotic world. As well as one-to-one life and executive coaching, she runs group workshops both online and in person. Today, we find out what's important to Catriona Kirwan. Hello, Catriona. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, James. Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, really looking forward to our chat. So, as always, the first question, Catriona, is what's important to you?
Well, that's a minefield, James. But if I was to break it down and think about it, right now, the most important thing to me is my own health and well-being, because I've been through peaks and troughs with it. And when I say health and well-being, I know it's probably cliche, but what I mean is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well-being. It's something that I very strong views on, and something that I've begun to understand more and more is around what's going on in the mind is reflected in the body. So if I have a lot of mental stress overload, I'm carrying heavy emotions, it manifests in physical pain. And the more I've begun to understand that and realize that I'm only of any use to myself or anyone else when I'm well, that's now something that's, I think, top priority for me, possibly the most important thing to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well. You say that the first sort of level, you say, of the health and well-being, but the fact that you already know, in a sense, there's some layers under that as well, and those sort of 4 sort of pillars that you mentioned. Tell me more about those sort of then pillars, in the sense of, like you said, it was the mental, spiritual, physical, emotional. How do you sort of, because there's always a sort of like rotation or such with them, they're all in play at one time, I suppose, aren't they? So how do you know which one needs the most sort of support at any one time, I suppose, is the question.
Well, physically, I mean, I would look at the 4 pillars of physical health being diet, exercise, sleep, and hydration. And most of the time, I feel I'm quite well on top of those. The mental and emotional, a lot of it is, I got more and more used to checking in. Okay. How am I feeling? Am I carrying any heavy emotions now? Particularly, I suppose, in challenging times, if there's a challenge personally or professionally, what emotions am I carrying? Because for years, I think I'm probably no different to anyone else. I would have carried heavy emotions without even realizing it. And then what happens is I sort of look at them as heavy rocks in a backpack that you're carrying around with you, or that I would have been carrying around with me, and it's energy sapping.
Okay.
So that's the emotional part. The mental part then is all about resilience and perceptions. How am I perceiving things? Because I think stress and overwhelm and anxiety and all of those things, particularly stress and overwhelm, and I'm not talking about, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder or any of those big grief stressors. I'm talking about everyday stressors. It's very much down to how we perceive things rather than the things or situations themselves. So I suppose I'm continually checking in with myself, asking myself, is that the only way I can perceive this situation? Or how can I look at it differently? What other perspectives can I take on it? And knowing that my perception of it is my choice. That would have been something I was never familiar with. A situation was a situation, and that was it. Whereas now I'm continually challenging myself to look at it in a different way. So that, I think, really helps then with the whole mental resilience. And then the last one, the spiritual, this is something I work with clients, you know, a lot on now, is around purpose and meaning. And it has becoming, I suppose, more the buzzword over lockdown, having purpose and meaning in life, or relating to something bigger than yourself, that sort of thing. So I do a lot of meditation, which again is new for me in the last, I suppose, 5 years. I've been doing a lot of meditation. I do a lot of breathing exercises, walking in nature, and actually sinking into nature, heightening up the senses, looking, listening, smelling, feeling nature. And that connection, I've restarted a little vegetable garden out the back now. It's about 4 foot by 4 foot, but immersing in it, you know, tapping into the soul. That's how I describe it. How do I feed my soul? These are my tasks every day, but how does that relate to my own sense of purpose, meaning, well-being, tapping into my soul, my creative part? And when I talk about creativity, you know, people sort of say, oh, I'm not creative. But I'm not talking about, I'm not Van Gogh or, you know, any of these people. You don't need to be to tap into your creativity. But creativity is around problem solving. So how can I think outside the box, you know, think on my feet in times of crisis? And I think the more you tap into the soul, feed that spiritual energy, and connect with meaning and purpose, it helps you to problem solve in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they would be the 4.
Yeah, and absolutely. Thanks for going into more. The first thing I'd like to maybe go into a bit more, in a sense of when you're talking about the example you were saying about that taking the rocks out of the backpack, and the sort of like, you know, those heavy burdens of those almost like build up of stresses, in the sense of the way that I was hearing it. Not, as you say, nothing. It might be not necessarily that one traumatic or one really out there experience, just the day-to-day of build-up of stuff. And you said that you're now able to be sort of in a position where you're kind of able to recognize it sort of maybe quicker and sooner, check in with yourself. But maybe before, you kind of just accepted the situation as it was. Was there something that kind of made you, like, how were you able to flip that? Do you know what I mean? What was the sort of turning point for yourself where you actually go, I can see this in a different way?
When I first heard of what a gratitude practice was, actually, and that's about 5 years ago. And I was reading about a monk out in the missions, and how he used the gratitude practice. And in every moment, he could see opportunities. So I read up a lot on it, and I at the time I thought, this isn't something that's going to work. But I said, I'll give it a go. And the consistency of it was, over time, it really started to have an impact. Now, mine was, I'm not, even though I work with clients on journaling, I'm not somebody who journals. It's not, I don't have the patience for it. But my gratitude practice was reflective. So, I would sit every morning and think of what I was grateful for. And the more I did it, the more it started to help me in my day-to-day life, so that when I would be faced with a challenge, I jump into gratitude and and look and say, what can I be grateful? Okay, this is a challenge. Where's the opportunity here? What can I be grateful for? And I think actually a funny one, I have 4 children, and my husband was working in the UK in March 2020. So lockdown came then. They all moved home. We were homeschooling 4 kids, and it was all a bit chaotic. So then they went back to school. And the second lockdown, I think you might remember, happened in January after Christmas. And I was well into my gratitude practice at this time, and it was just something that came kind of naturally to me. And then we heard the kids were not going back to school in January, and there was devastation. This was like another round of homeschooling. And I woke up the first morning, and I actually started laughing in the bed before I even got out. And my husband said to me, what are you laughing at? I said, my gratitude practice. It's just come straight to my brain. I'm so grateful that I don't have to get out of bed and scurry and make 4 lunches in the next, 20 minutes. And it was just, then I really noticed how much my brain had switched. So in any conversation now, be it personally, professionally, I'm always looking for the opportunities, or how maybe the situation could be perceived differently. And that's it's something that has developed over time. I've just rewired my brain. And because I believe in the whole neuroscience of rewiring the brain and developing new habits consistently, it just has stuck now. And it's something that really stands to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I just want everyone to sort of really take that in, because what I really love about what you just said in the example is, one, in a sense, obviously the impact that it's had on you, that you've been able to sort of explain that, but it's the practicality of something, that it's a tool, that it's a process or a practice that can be done by anyone. And very simply, you said, some people do like to say journal it and write it out, but in the sense of like, just because you don't journal it doesn't mean you can't practice it by just sitting there and really sort of doing that reflective. And the fact that you said the consistency of it, the fact that then now that your brain immediately goes to that, or maybe it goes to it a lot quicker than when it would have done previously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really interesting. Yeah.
And there's a few things I even saw this year. My mum died this time last year, and I would have been very close to her. And the old me, I think, would have crumbled and fallen apart. But and in the end, it was quite suddenly. But I couldn't believe how much I leaned into gratitude for having had her in my life for so long, for the fact that she didn't suffer, that, she wasn't at the end of her days, in a nursing home. She never wanted to be there. And all of those things just came flooding into my head, which helped me, I think, over the last year to sort of get through what had just happened. And I think the reason I'm even mentioning that is to get the message out there as to how powerful gratitude can be. And it's as you say, it's a very, very simple practice. It takes 1 minute, 2 minutes in the morning. But it can really change how you view your life, and how we view our lives determines how happy we'll be, not what we actually have. It's how we view it. So I think, that's something that's been really impactful for me.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I think it definitely, demonstrates it. And I think as well, the last thing I'd say on that as well is like because the sense of, I would very much share your sentiments in relation to gratitude as well, and the practice of it. But I think it's also when you engage in it, because it's a conscious thought process. It's not just saying like an affirmation. It's not just saying I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. It's actually getting your brain to think about something that you're grateful for. So it's making you really conscious of it. And then as you say, and then the knock-on effect is then how you're feeling, versus trying to maybe quote unquote convince yourself of a feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's something that comes up a lot in my coaching practice. I say to clients all the time, you are never going out of this session with a made up mantra. If it's not true and you're not feeling it, it doesn't work, because they will, clients will regularly say, oh, I don't want to be doing any of those mantra things. They don't work. And my answer to that is, you're 100% right. If it's not true and meaningful for you, it will not work. But by sort of looking at your own life and what's meaningful for you, and what those beliefs are that are keeping you stuck, and how you can unload those like the rocks, and start to bring in more things that you're grateful for, even in your own personality, your own strengths, and identifying them, and then kind of working your mantras or your empowering beliefs from there. It's much more impactful, because it's actually true, and it comes from within, from yourself.
Yeah. I love that. When you said that sort of made up mantras, I got a tingly in that, like, because that's just the way you've put it there. Is like, that's absolutely true, in a sense of like, it has to come from a point of truth. It can't just be something. Yeah, no, I love that. The other point I'd sort of go back on in those sort of parts of the pillars, or those 4 things you talk about, in the sense of the last one you talked about, in the sense of the spiritual side of stuff, and bringing it more into sort of the idea of purpose and meaning, and something that's outside of yourself. It's always an interesting one when talking to people about purpose, because sometimes people find it quite a sort of, I don't know, unusual thing to talk about. They're not sure if they know what it is. So did you, now that you moved into this world of sort of coaching and the sort of industry of well-being, if we want to call it that sort of thing, is that something that you grew a purpose to go into it, or did you have it and then wanted to shift? How did you sort of find it quote unquote purpose to do what you do?
I think I was always good with people. I worked for 20 years on the front line. I'm a radiographer. That's my background. I've done kind of various other courses, worked in different departments. I was never the most technical person in the department. That was not my strength. My strength was the people. Okay. Working with patients, staff. I worked on a lot of different projects, just interacting, communicating with people. And I found a lot with friends. I would regularly be talking through challenges with them, their challenges, sometimes mine. And I just had a passion for it. So when we moved to Dublin, I moved to Dublin about 8 years ago. So I resigned my post in Cork, and I found the whole move very stressful. And I started reading, about stress, about self-help books, I suppose, that we all can pick up. And I found coaching. And initially, I did the Executive and Life coaching course for my own personal development. But what I found was I absolutely loved it. And I saw the difference it made to me in my life. And suddenly I just had this notion that the world needed to hear about this. The world needed to be able to actually help themselves to overcome their own challenges, to embrace change, to do all of those things. And then I moved into the neuroscience part. I did an extra layer on that and got into the whole stress part. And I think I recognized then that I had gone through quite a number of years in my own life under a lot of stress. I took on a lot of stress. And I was totally unaware of it. And eventually it started to show up as physical ill health. And I think that's what I'm kind of referring to in the beginning when I was talking about what's going on in the mind is reflected in the body. So that was a huge revelation for me. And the more then I studied that, the more I read up on it, the more I read kind of research articles from kind of the more advanced universities in the States and that, I thought, God, this is something people need to hear. So that became my purpose as such. And it really gives me so much back when I can help anyone in that way, you know, and that's, I suppose, what I see as my purpose now, starting with my own family. And I can see all that I have learned and what I'm trying to implement at home. It has made a huge difference. And it has made an amazing difference with the people I work with. So, yeah, I guess that's how my purpose has evolved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's again, thanks for going into that, excuse me, into that background and sharing that in sense of where it came from. I was always interested in a sense of when people almost shift careers or shift, you know, industries as such. But also I think, and this is where I like to ask that question, in sense of finding how people do those transitions, because really from what you're saying is, as much as obviously you were doing your work as a radiographer, the skills or the most skillful part is the way that you put your role doing that was about working and communicating with people. So in a sense of like, from looking at the outside, working in the coaching industry and the life coaching industry versus being a radiographer, they look like they're at two ends of a spectrum. Like if you they don't, there's no crossover in that diagram, but clearly they were probably a lot closer than maybe even you expected.
Yes. And now when I look, I see when most people go into hospital, particularly into a radiology department, they're coming for investigations. So they automatically think there's something wrong with them. So that threat sends them into fight or flight. And it's interesting now, you know, when I worked as a radiographer and a patient came in, you say, raise your right arm, and they raise their left, and you kind of think, okay, lie on your tummy, and they lie on their back, and you know, all of this. And it really has given me a massive insight into how the brain works in fight or flight. So in that stress state, it's really difficult to make logical, organized decisions. And that's something that I'm working with in corporates now, in, you know, with clients, one-to-one clients, to get them to understand that when you're in that state, your brain is no longer working rationally. It catastrophizes. It's got, the subconscious is kicking in to keep you safe. And I relate that back to the hospital now, and I can see over and over and over and over again, particularly if a patient heard that it was the consultant coming, or, you know, it's the brain goes into fight or flight, and then they're not taking in anything. So that was something that really bothered me in lockdown, when patients going into hospital had to go in on their own.
Yeah.
I firmly believe it is so important, particularly older patients, to have somebody with them, because their brain goes into fight or flight. They take in the first two words, and then they don't hear anything else. So that was something, you know, that I even though I moved from the hospital to the coaching, I reflected back, and you know, it's a continual learning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's just, I think it really demonstrates in a sense of, and I remember maybe you can say this when maybe with I don't know if you experience this with any of the people you work with as well, whether it be private or corporate, in the sense of you could have easily pigeonholed yourself as, no, I'm the radiographer, or you know what I mean, in the sense of I can only do this industry, so I have to find something else within frontline, or find, you know, versus, you know, when you're going into the space or the industry of coaching, the fact that it's the openness in sense of like, well, as you said there, but I noticed these things from those 20 odd years experience or whatever it was of the front line and working with those patients, that you have seen some human behaviors that are reflective now. So, you know, when going to the question sense of when you're working with people, is that something you're finding when you're working with people, that for them to even just open up to think other possibilities, as opposed to keeping themselves in this one box they may have created for themselves?
Oh, yes, yes. And what I notice a lot is a lot of people don't view their strengths as strengths. They view them as something that everybody has, but those other people have these other strengths that I don't have. Well, actually, no, your strengths are these. Not everybody has those. And I suppose, again, back to the hospital, I would have attended a lot of MDT's multidisciplinary team meetings, where there was different perspectives, different viewpoints, and that whole interacting with people with a different skill set. I would have got a lot of experience there that I use now. And I say to clients all the time, this wasn't a waste of it. No part of your life is a waste of time. There is no part of your life that you don't learn from. And if I'm 100% honest, the biggest learning for me was probably the couple of years that I was doing the coaching course, but I was at home with my 4 kids and moved to a new place. And that whole back to the creativity, being able to think outside the box and on the spot and problem solve, and traffic jams, and 4 kids to be in 4 different places in a new place, and I didn't know anybody, and managing all of that is probably takes much more headspace and organization than what I do now, where I'm very organized and I have my clients set out for the day and my working day. While it's challenging in a different way, that whole barrage of chaos coming at me all the time is what really helped me to be resilient and to start using all of those tools, like the gratitude, like the meditation, like the nature walks, and all of those things that now help me to stay calm and grounded, and really, I suppose, help me to perform at my best professionally. But they would have come from overcoming challenges in my personal life. So I think that's another thing that I really try to help clients to understand, that it's one whole life, and each area of your life will help you in all the other areas.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested now in the sense of, because you said you initially went to do the sort of coaching qualification more from a personal perspective and for your own sort of development or, insight. What made you think then, oh, I could do this as a business, or I could do this as a way for yourself? What was there a switch, or what made you think, I'll go for this?
Well, was there a switch? I suppose it was somewhere at the back of my mind, but I didn't really believe I could do it. And then one of my lecturers said to me, if you don't go ahead and do this, it is the biggest waste of talent. And I suppose I got that message that it was something I could do. Now, hindsight, and you probably know this yourself, things like marketing, like I suppose marketing is the bigger one. Yeah. But when you start off as a solopreneur, you're doing everything. You're the accountant, you're doing the social media management, you're doing the appointment bookings, the phone calls, all of those things. And I suppose if somebody told me before I started that all of that was involved and that's what, you know, took the time and the energy, I would have said, oh, I'd never be able to do that. But piecemeal, bit by bit, and I suppose getting into a community of coaches and business people has really helped with that. And when I see initially joining business groups where a lot of the people there are solopreneurs, or maybe they have one or two people working with them, and getting help and guidance and sounding boards from those people and what they did and what worked for them. And then I suppose really understanding that Rome wasn't built in a day. It's something that I decided then I'd give it a go and see how it went. I didn't put any pressure on myself. I didn't really know what my ideal niche was. But the more I did it, I knew it energized me. I got fulfillment. I got energy from it. I was a better person when I was coaching. And that then, I think, propelled me to keep going. And I think the thing that most kept me going was the results that I was seeing from clients and what they were saying back to me. And, you know, occasionally I'd hear then, more people should be doing this. Everybody should be doing this, you know. And that really, I suppose, gave me that clear message that it's something that I wanted to keep doing for my own fulfillment, but also for the benefit of my clients. And the more I did it, the more experience I got, the more effective and impactful my coaching sessions were becoming. And that as well helped me to keep going.
Absolutely. No, it's and I think even the way you were explaining it there, in a sense of if I'm hearing it right, a sense of two of the biggest drivers, I suppose, for you to doing it is what it still gives for you on a personal level. And it's how you said that fulfillment, but it is led essentially by, again, those words you had before of helping people. It's about helping those clients. I'm interested when I talk to people who in this sort of industry as well, in the sense of when you're talking about clients and the people you work with, you know, and now you've been doing it for a little bit of time since. Have you sort of found that sort of then niche or the particular type of clients that you work best with yet, or is it still an ongoing thing that you do?
It's ongoing, and my youngest client is a university student. She's doing really well. Probably my oldest client is going into retirement, and it's kind of next steps there. But I'm finding the challenges are more niching now. That whole stress around moving up. A lot of my clients are moving up the corporate ladder, and it's around stress, overwhelm. Can I do it? Am I able to? How am I going to balance everything else in my life? All of those things. And that's where I love that space. And I get energy from it, and clients get results from it, and they see how impactful it is, and they take on the tools. They've signed up for it. They really want it. They're putting in the work, and they're seeing the results. And that is complete fulfillment for me. I love to see those results. So, and I have a mix, you know, male, female. I coach both. Ultimately, similar challenges. Maybe they're seen more in females, but there are a lot of males who have similar challenges.
No, it sounds like a very as you say, a very interesting space to be working in, because I suppose at the moment, from outside looking in the sense of it's very competitive, I suppose, at the moment as well, in that space, for you know, for the word, I was talking to someone yesterday, the word talent it's a competitive space for people who are trying to move up into those positions. So I say it's quite a very interesting space to be working in at this particular moment.
Mm-hmm. And as I say to clients, it's all about how you present yourself, how you perceive situations, how you come across. Do you really believe you can do this? Because if you don't believe it yourself, nobody else will believe it. And a lot of the time it comes back to that, and the staying in your own lane, no comparisons, build yourself up here. What is your vision? What does success look like to you? Where are you now versus where you want to be? And how can we bridge that gap? And just working piecemeal on those parts, and watching the changes. As I said to a client the other day, I think she was probably on her 4th or 5th session, and it was an in-person session. And as I was parking, I saw her pulling up, and she hopped out of the car. And as I said to her, you look like a completely different person, energized. I could see it in her eyes. She was glowing. She was, and I like to use the comparison. I just say, just treat it like a pair of shoes. This is your new role. Stand into it like a pair of shoes. Own it. And she just started laughing, and she said to me, "Oh, I'm standing in my shoes today. I can see that I'm now owning this." And obviously that is just so rewarding for me to look on and see that transition.
Absolutely. No, I can totally understand that, in a sense of how you get that fulfillment from people that you're working with, getting where they wanted to get to. Just to move it outside of, I suppose, the sort of the working environment for a moment, because obviously what you do is, I don't know if intense is the right word, but it's very all-consuming in some ways when you're coaching. Is there anything that's important to you that you do outside of, the sort of quote unquote work that's just for you, that helps you, whether it be to relax, have fun, do something completely different? Is there anything else that you do that's really important?
Well, I walk every day and I meditate every day. So meditation takes 15 minutes. I've got to do it. And I walk mainly in the morning. If I have an early start and I miss my morning walk, I'll go at lunchtime. If my husband is working from home, we go together. That's something that's, really important to me, that relationship and spending time together. So he listens to my well-being tips, and as I said to him at one stage, "You're my best client." So that's something that's important to me. I've recently taken up hiking. I haven't gone very far yet, but that's my new hobby, and I just love the countryside, the beaches, nature. That sort of thing really fills my cup, and time on my own out in nature I love. The other thing is connections are really important to me. Relationships, be it with family or friends. And it's not that I need 100 friends. It's just that connection and starting to get back out there and do things since lockdown. And I've been trying. I was down in Cork recently for an appointment with my son, and it was very easy, I suppose, just to go down, do it and come back. But I thought, I'm going to make the conscious effort now and to meet a friend for lunch. And everybody thinks, "Oh God, I haven't seen that person for 4 years," but we've been in lockdown for 3 years. And I find, a lot of friends say that, "Oh, I couldn't contact him or her again now because it's so many years since we've been in contact." And then just a simple text, "I'm around, do you want to meet for lunch?" And then suddenly it's like, there's been no time in the middle. So I love chats with friends. I have a couple of walking friends, and being out in nature. Those kind of things.
And the nature one is actually it's quite a frequent sort of, obviously, what people say, and I would very much share it, in the sense of, even myself, I have the people heard I'm sure before. I have 2 dogs, and I would walk them every day just across the road in the park that I live here. But even this, pretty much you could say it's the same walk. It's a different walk every day because every day is different. So I'd be interested in sense of like from the nature, what does the sort of being in nature sort of give you?
Peace,
Mm.
silence, and an exercise I do is I just take a minute to look around and take in all the colors. And it might be only green, and I'm actually mentally looking at the 40 shades of green. And then, I move to the sounds and what can I hear now if I sort of block off my sight? And it just really, for want of not using the quote from the song, but fills up my senses. The smell, I focus God on the fresh cut grass, the smell, the damp smell, let them all in, and then just the feel of the fresh air, all of that. It just kind of is very grounding.
Yeah.
And sometimes I find if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, I find myself looking at the trees. When I can, I walk down to the coast. It's only a mile. And just lift my head up and watch the ocean and how it just keeps bringing those waves in and out and in, and that it creates space. Because I think in our world now, with everything coming at us from all sides, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So it's like taking myself out of it, putting myself at the edge of the sea, looking out and seeing that there's a big, wide, open space out there. And taking in that space helps to declutter what's in my head. And it's something as a child, I grew up on a farm, and in school in rural Ireland, sometimes I, if I'm being honest, I found it isolating. But I do remember as a child, I would go down into the fields and I would sit in the field with the buttercups or the whatever wildflowers, and just look around at the green. We lived in the heart of the Golden Vale. It was a very rich green colours, and even from that stage, I was quite attached to nature. And even though I live in the city now, I walk in nature every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for going into that a little bit more, because I think it can't be overestimated, and the power and the sort of impact, the really true positive impact it can have of being outside, and in some ways as well, because there's two things in a sense of like, because I'm a runner and I'm back into training at the moment. So there's some days where I'm going out to run because I'm specifically doing a training session for the marathon or whatever. So I'm not necessarily taking much in. I'm just concentrating on my pace or whatever it is. It's much more sort of practical in some ways, because I've got to get through 10K or 20K, whatever it is. And then there's the other times though, it's like, I'm not doing it for any other reason than I'm just doing it. There's no agenda. There's no goal barring just to enjoy being outside. So it's kind of like, you can do both. You can have the exercise or, just to put it, but there's nothing like just going out and just being in it. And I think you've really shared and demonstrated the power of it. So thank you for that. What I love to ask all my guests when they come on is, I'm really fascinated with quotes and phrases and how they can be useful. So do you have any quotes or phrases that are important to you?
I think one of them I've already kind of even touched on. It's the Marianne Williams. We can always choose to perceive things differently. So when you're stuck, how can I choose to perceive this differently? What other way can I look at it? That's one. Another one, since I've set up my own business, and I could meander through the day, not very focused. One that I use all the time now is John DeMartini. And it's, if you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, it will automatically fill with low priority distractions that don't. So I'm always asking myself now, high priority action or a low priority distraction. And it's, I think John Rowan has a version of it, either you run the day or the day runs you. But it's a similar theme.
Yeah.
So I have John DeMartini in the back of my head, you know, when I feel I'm not being productive or whatever, or if I'm scattered looking at emails or social media or whatever. And I've sort of read into it and researched it a bit more around the energy. So when we're scrolling and reacting to everyone else's priorities, it's reactive energy, which saps us. So I try more and more to work in proactive energy. So in the morning, what are my priorities? Get those done before I move into the reactive and prioritizing everybody else's needs. So yeah, that's something that works really well for me, and I do love that quote.
Yeah, no, I love that. Even the way you just the shortening of it, the high priority actions instead of low priority distractions. That's a really, no, I love that one. And I would have heard of John DeMartini before and that, but I wasn't necessarily familiar with that quote. No, it's a really interesting one and powerful one. Even and goes say that a little bit further than the Jim Rohn one in sense of the day runs you, because it's that one can be quite sort of. There's nothing to me. There's nothing as you can't really hang your hat on it. But the sort of high priority actions, low priority distractions. They go, oh well, I know what they are. I know exactly what both of those things are, and it can kind of really kind of go, whoa, actually. And I think in some ways, and I don't know, from when I'm just literally thinking out loud, hearing that quote is, we can get caught up in thinking we've got to be doing all the time. You know, as opposed to no. Get the high priority stuff done. Even if it takes you, it doesn't have to take you the whole day. It's getting it done, you know, versus the distractions, which can just then take all day. It's about the productivity, is I suppose the word in there, and the efficiency of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're not going to be productive for 10 hours in a day. You might have, I mean, the average person has 4 or 5 hours high productive time. Less even. But if you get a good 2 hours in at the start of the day and the high priority tasks are done, then there's no guilt, there's no anything moving to low priority distractions. But I think what a lot of clients, friends, people I talk to have found that in lockdown and people working from home and now the hybrid, there's a lot more low priority distractions around the house. The coffee machine is the top one. You know, the dishwasher, come down for a cup of tea and the dishwasher could do with being filled or unloaded or whatever. And it's very easy to get distracted. The phone then, of course, is the biggest one. And then you're very much in reactive energy. When you're on, you know, when the phone is out, you're reading all the emails, the social media, all of that, and you're reacting to everybody else's priorities. So yeah, that's one that I do like, I have to say.
Yeah, really good. Are there any then other people, would you say, that have been an important influence on you, whether it be in the public eye or privately?
Interestingly, if I was to think about that one, I think the biggest influence on my life for me has been my mother. I think she was probably someone who was ahead of her time. She grew up in rural Ireland as well, in a male-dominated house. She had 3 brothers, and instead of seeing that as a negative or a challenge, well, I suppose she did see it as a challenge. She found her voice very quickly, and you know, she was never overshadowed by her brothers or by men in life, and that was something she taught us very early in life. So that when I went out in the world, the thought never crossed my mind that, you know, if I was up against a male for anything, that they would be somehow better than me, or, you know.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one. She always backed me. I'm one of 5. She always backed all of us, encouraged us, really valued education, and go out there. It's a big world. Explore it, learn, keep learning. You've never learned enough. And up to the very end, she read the newspaper every day from cover to cover. And you know, she always knew what was going on. And I think that certainly influenced me in my life, to be out, get out there and do things and explore and back yourself and believe that you can do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, very, very powerful to have that that person in your life that completely believes in you and in whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah. And I think an interesting one for me in that was, as I say, she came from rural Ireland. She was the first girl from her school to go to UCD, which was a big deal. And even though she was a stay-at-home mom then, she was very empowered. She did a lot of other things. And when I took time out in my career, I never saw it as something that happened to me. It was something for me. I saw it as a privilege to have the opportunity to spend that time with my children. And as I said earlier, relationships are very important to me, and building relationships with my children who are now teenagers is hugely important. And back to the original point, I suppose it's never the situation or the, you know, what's going, it's how you perceive it. And I always perceived, you know, time in the home with my children as a privilege, as something that you know, I was so happy and grateful that I had the opportunity to spend that time with them.
Absolutely. No, and I think that whole I don't know if it's a way of you just being as you know, coming through in sense of, like, as you say from the start, a sense of the way you see a situation, not just even see it and perceive it, but then the way that you then behave in it. It's one thing it's one way to perceive something in a certain way. It's then how you then follow through with the actions when you're actually in that and living through that situation as well. So I think it's a really powerful thing to share at the moment as well, in relation to you know, stay-at-home parenting or whatever that, you know, phrase wants to be used, you know, because it's still such a challenging topic. Maybe I don't know if topic's the right word, but so it's really important, I think, that we hear people from it, that it's a positive thing, you know, in whichever person is doing it. So thank you for that. I have one more question for you, Catriona, before we finish up, which is, what's important for your future?
For my future, I think continuing to live aligned to my values. Things I value most are love, fulfillment, relationships. To continue to work on those relationships, work on the fulfillment, and that you know, that reward and feedback that comes from helping others to overcome their challenges. I think it's important for me to keep doing that, and to continue to grow and learn. I think any day that I'm not growing and developing is a day that maybe I could have done better. So it doesn't mean that I'm reading 10 encyclopedias every day or anything. Not that people read encyclopedias anymore, but that I'm, you know, continuing to stretch my brain, stretch my mind, think and keep time to think, because very often we're in the doing.
Yeah.
And I do find myself, I can get caught up in that doing, and, you know, stepping back to think and to continue to foster and build relationships. I do find I'm at my best when my probably personal relationships are good. And something I've learned a long time ago is that relationships are it's like a job. What you get out, what you put in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something that you know I will continue to do. I saw in lockdown very much the negative impact of isolation, particularly on the older generation. I mean,
Yeah.
I firmly believe there are thousands of people around the world who died of loneliness over lockdown, because we are wired for connections.
Yeah.
And to have relationships, meaningful relationships. So yeah, that's something that I will continue to grow and develop into the future.
Love it. Catriona, as I say, it's been wonderful to chat to you. I really enjoyed the conversation. I would love people to continue to support you and what you're doing. We will share, obviously, all your details in the notes, but if you want to give a shout out now where people can follow and connect with you online.
I have a website, Catriona Kerwin Coaching, and all my information is on that. I'm most active on LinkedIn. You will find me on LinkedIn, Catriona Kerwin, and I also have an Instagram account at Catriona Kerwin. So yeah, that's my email details are on my website.
Brilliant stuff. As I say, we'll make sure all of those links are in the notes as well, so you can connect and follow with Catriona at those sites. So just to again, one more time, thank you so much for joining me today, Catriona.
Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to What's Important to You. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and share. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Again, you can follow me at James Dean Coaching on Facebook and Instagram. Connect with me on LinkedIn or find out more about me on jamesdeancoaching.com.